Medieval warfare wasn't just swords, shields, and gallant knights clashing on horseback. Beneath the surface of chivalry and honor was a world of dark genius. Weapons so vicious, so unpredictable, or so devastating, they had to be banned almost as soon as they appeared. These weren't elegant tools of war. They were instruments of fear, chaos, and raw brutality, often breaking every rule of fair combat that medieval society claimed to value. Whether designed to maim, terrify, or completely change the rules of battle, these weapons were too dangerous to be left in circulation. Some were outlawed for their cruelty, others simply gave too much power to the wrong hands. Either way, their impact was unforgettable. Number 1. The Warhammer. In a time when the knight in shining armor represented the ultimate battlefield elite, the Warhammer became the rude awakening that shattered that illusion. Literally. As plate armor advanced, offering almost full body protection against slashes, stabs, and arrows, many believed the age of vulnerability was over. But that's when medieval weapon makers responded with raw physics and a stick. The Warhammer. Unlike bladed weapons, which relied on slicing or puncturing, the Warhammer delivered focused kinetic trauma. Its design wasn't fancy, just brutally efficient. It featured a solid hammerhead mounted on a wooden or metal shaft, often balanced with a spike on the opposite end. That spike wasn't decorative, it was for punching through helmets, chainmail, and even shields. While a sword might glance off a knight's armor, a well-placed hammer blow could cave in a breastplate or crumple a helmet like paper. The armor didn't need to break for the damage to be lethal. The sheer impact force could rattle the brain, shatter bones, or crush organs beneath the armor. This was the kind of weapon that ignored the elegance of knightly combat and focused entirely on results. And it didn't require years of fencing lessons, just muscle and rage. That's why warhammers became the everyman's tool of destruction. A blacksmith, a farmer, or a foot soldier could pick one up and become a real threat to even the most prestigious mounted warrior. There were many variations. Some had long handles, making them ideal for swinging from horseback or from behind a shield wall. Others were compact, meant for tight spaces or one-handed use with a shield. The classic form often had a flat hammer side for blunt trauma and a pointed spike for punching through tough materials. Late-period models even added flanged faces or reinforced ridges, maximizing penetration on impact. The evolution of the warhammer tracked alongside improvements in armor. As helmets got thicker, warhammers got heavier or more pointed. When gorgets and breastplates became curved to deflect blows, smiths adapted hammerheads to concentrate energy on smaller contact points. It was a back-and-forth game of survival and destruction. Every new innovation in armor brought a new variation in hammer design intended to overcome it. One of the most well-documented uses of warhammers came at the Battle of Agincourt in 1415. The French nobility, weighed down by thick plate armor and stuck in muddy terrain, became easy targets for English soldiers armed with hammers and other blunt force weapons. Their armor became their own iron tombs. The warhammer represents more than a weapon. It symbolizes the shift in medieval warfare away from elite, knight-on-knight duels to a grittier, more brutal, more democratic form of battle. It stripped away the pageantry and revealed the raw physics of war. No matter how shiny your armor, if someone hits you hard enough in the right spot, you're going down. Number 2, the flail. Among the most infamous weapons of the medieval era, the flail stood out not just for its brutality, but for its unpredictable, almost chaotic nature. At a glance, the weapon seemed deceptively simple. Just a wooden handle, a short chain, and a spiked metal ball at the end. But in the hands of a skilled warrior, it became a force of pure mayhem. The flail's main advantage was its flexibility. Unlike rigid weapons such as swords or axes, the flail's chain allowed the striking head to swing independently of the user's motion. This gave it a whip-like effect, enabling the spiked ball to bypass an opponent's shield or parry. A knight might raise a shield expecting to block a sword strike, only to have the flail arc around the edge and slam into the side of their helmet. Its motion was difficult to predict. both for the target and often the wielder. That made it a nightmare in close combat, and a serious risk in untrained hands. Training with a flail required more than brute strength. It demanded precise timing, excellent spatial awareness, and a good grasp of momentum. Historical records and modern reenactments both confirm that injuries during practice were common. Bruises, concussions, even broken bones. Fighters often hurt themselves before they ever faced an opponent. For this reason, flails were not standard-issue weapons. They were used by specialized fighters willing to invest the time, and often the pain, needed to master them. Despite its learning curve, the flail had significant tactical advantages. Against heavily armored foes, the spiked head could concentrate tremendous kinetic energy into a small impact area. The spikes themselves were designed to penetrate or dent armor, causing internal injuries even if the armor wasn't pierced outright. The impact was often enough to fracture bones, knock opponents unconscious, or render them incapable of continuing the fight. Different cultures and regions produced their own versions of the flail. Some had a single striking head, others featured 2 or 3, multiplying the danger. These multi-headed flails were especially vicious, turning every swing into a wide, erratic spread of destruction. Some designs even included hollowed-out metal balls that whistled when spun, creating a terrifying noise meant to intimidate opponents before the weapon struck. It was psychological warfare, medieval style. Knights and soldiers quickly recognized the danger. Manuals from the period include sections dedicated to defending against flails. Techniques involved creating distance, reading the rhythm of the swings, and attempting to trap the chain. But success was far from guaranteed. Even elite warriors could fall victim to one unpredictable strike. A mistimed block or an overconfident charge could end in disaster. The flail wasn't just a weapon, it was a statement. Brutal, wild, and unforgiving. In the chaos of medieval battle, few things sent enemies running faster than the sight and sound of a spiked ball whirling through the air. Number 3. The Golden Dog. Also known as the Goiden Dog, the Golden Dog was a weapon that perfectly embodied the principle of form follows function. At first glance, it seemed almost laughably primitive. A thick wooden shaft, usually about 4 to 5 feet long, capped with a sharp iron spike. Yet, this weapon played a critical role in one of the most decisive and unexpected military victories of the medieval era. The Gooden Dog was famously used during the Battle of the Golden Spurs in 1302. This confrontation saw the urban militias and commoners of Flanders take on, and decisively defeat, France's elite mounted knights. The knights, armored head to toe and trained from boyhood in warfare, were widely considered Europe's most effective fighting force. But their confidence led to a miscalculation. They assumed sheer prestige and heavy armor would crush a ragtag group of tradesmen, artisans, and farmers. They were wrong. The Flemish had developed a simple yet brutally effective technique to counter cavalry charges. When a mounted knight charged, the militia would plant their Goedendag on the ground, spike upward. The force of the charge would cause the knight or his horse to impale themselves, stopping the momentum cold. If that didn't kill the knight outright, the blunt end of the weapon, used as a heavy club, would finish the job. This tactic transformed what looked like a basic stick into a tool of battlefield domination. The name Goedendag itself is the source of some debate. Some historians think it comes from the Dutch phrase for good day, possibly referencing the dark irony of greeting someone with a weapon to the face. Others suggest the name may relate to the sound the weapon made when striking a helmeted head. A grim, good day indeed. Regardless of its etymology, its impact was undeniable. One of the Golden Dog's greatest strengths was accessibility. It required virtually no training to use. You didn't need years of swordplay instruction or horsemanship lessons. If you could swing a bat or hold a broom, you could be deadly with a Goedendag. This democratization of battlefield lethality challenged the feudal order. Power shifted, even if just briefly, from the armored nobility to the hands of determined townsmen. In terms of construction, the weapon was a masterpiece of crude efficiency. The wooden shaft was thick enough to withstand heavy blows, and the iron spike could pierce armor or disable a horse. Variations of the Gudendog existed, some with longer shafts for use in tightly packed ranks, others shorter and more manageable for single combat. What they all shared was their utility against cavalry and their psychological effect. For knights who saw comrades fall to what looked like a sharpened fence post, the illusion of invulnerability vanished quickly. The Battle of the Golden Spurs wasn't just a military victory, it was a political statement. It proved that expensive armor and noble blood weren't enough to guarantee dominance. A simple weapon, wielded by the so-called common folk, could, and did, break the backbone of one of the most powerful armies in Europe. Number 4. The Zweihander. The Zweihander, German for two-hander,